Isaac Asimov. This is a continuation of a show that began last night, so to speak. I'm Dick Cavett, but he is a scientist, historian, futurologist, an incurable and invaluable explainaholic, if you'll accept that. And that might account for the fact that more than 400 and I don't know how many books he's written. His sci-fi adventures have at times been so accurate and foretold later events so well that a lot of people think he can predict the future and probably come to him wanting to know the lottery number. But as our scientific achievements are taking us to the reaches of the solar system, I think we might well ask him what might be next. Could the advances that are supposedly enriching our lives also endangering them? We know some of the answers to that, but here is Isaac Asimov.
Hi, the number of books is 431.
431. Well, I was going to say 430, and I thought that doesn't sound like enough.
Ah, well, the chronology of science and discovery is the 431st.
Oh, here's one you tapped out probably on the way to a movie or something in the back seat of the car.
Actually, it took 13 months.
This is rare at the moment, isn't it? Because this is
That's the only copy so far.
So if we could hold this hostage.
But in a couple of weeks, it'll be available in all the stores.
Can people buy Nemesis now? I hope so.
I think they can.
Yeah.
The official pub date is still a couple of weeks off, but I think you can get them in bookstores.
You have an enormous following, and a devoted following. I don't know how enormous. It'd be interesting to know. But do we have a nation that reads fast enough to keep up with your publication rate?
Well, I have to. I've read it all. And, but who would want to?
Well, you wouldn't recommend all your books to any one person,
No. There are several people who are completists. Yeah. They write me letters and ask me what my most recent books are and where they can get them, and sometimes I help them out. And in fact, I have one reader who not only insists on every single book I've written, but on the first printing. He's got to have that first printing. So as a matter of fact, this book, the chronology, is dedicated to him.
Oh, that's nice. It must be interesting to live into the time when a writer's earliest books are now not rare, collected, and more valuable than the...
Oh, let me tell you a story.
All right.
On this forthcoming January 19th will be the 40th anniversary of my first novel, Pebble in the Sky. And Doubleday wants to put out a limited 40th anniversary edition of Pebble in the Sky, and for that they wanted to get a copy of the original book so that they could use it to copy from. And they found they didn't have a copy. They had to go out and buy a copy. Oh, isn't it a shame? The book cost $2.50, hardcover, $2.50 when it came out. In order to get a copy, they had to pay $300.
That's got to be gratifying.
I felt good.
Now, I don't know what your total sales would be. Does an author ever know?
No,
for example, would a book of Stephen King's sell more than, say, 5 of your titles?
Oh, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised. Undoubtedly, he's the most successful writer, financially speaking, the world has ever seen.
Who do you read for fun?
Well, I read for fun Agatha Christie, P.G. Wodehouse, Mark Twain, and Charles Dickens. Every single one of them writing humor. But that's for fun. I almost never read for fun. Mostly I have to read to keep up with science.
Well, yeah, to keep ahead. And another way I could have introduced you would be that you're one of the probably tiny, almost immeasurable fraction of people alive who do exactly what they want to do most of the time.
That's
How
true.
could you be more enviable your life than
Well, there's one thing that makes it even better. That is when you're doing everything exactly the way you want to do it, and you know that that's what you're doing. There must be some poor souls who are doing exactly what they want, don't realize it. And then there they are on their deathbed saying, gee, I've had a great life and I kept complaining all the time. No, I know I'm lucky.
Because they've never been forced to do anything else. Now, when you tell me once, Barbara Walters said, don't you ever want to do anything but this?
Oh, yes.
If you were forced to run an elevator for a week, would you savor your life even more? Or forced to be a surgeon or something? Apparently you couldn't, but you couldn't like it any more than you do. But have you ever had a chance to realize how much you like it by having to do something else?
Why, yes. I spent 9 years being actively a professor of biochemistry at Boston University Medical School. And I enjoyed it, too, as far as giving the lectures and writing the textbooks were concerned, because I wrote a textbook. I did not enjoy the laboratory very much, and when the time came that I had to choose between my professing work and my writing, there wasn't a moment's hesitation.
Yeah.
I knew it would have to be my writing.
Any advice to the person who envies you but says, I don't know what I want to do? The world's full of these people, and so are the colleges.
Well, no, I don't have any advice except to try a lot of different things and see if something strikes them as interesting.
But you
I always knew from the start that I wanted to write. I didn't think I'd make a living at it, so that I went on to get my degrees and become a professor of biochemistry.
Your father wanted you to be a medicine man.
Yes, he was crazy, but I didn't know you were allowed to go against your father's wishes. So I tried, but not very hard.
This was an old country father from Russia?
Absolutely. Brought me up on Talmudic principles and destroyed my life.
Or destroyed your life thereby, or are those two connected?
Oh, yes, they're connected. I mean, you know, full of stuff about how honesty is the best policy and how I have to work hard. You know, he succeeded in making me just not suitable for the 80s, that's all.
What's supposed to be moral about the phrase honesty is the best policy? It's a sheer calculated phrase.
I know. It means you're going to get into heaven, and that's the way to really make a lot of money.
You're right. That it's the best policy implies you profit from being honest.
Yeah.
You'd think more politicians would try it if they...
Well, they probably know that's wrong.
Yeah, they realize there's a fallacy in it. What's your box score now, Isaac, in terms of... you sort of invented the robot before the robot was invented.
And I talked about the pocket computer before that was invented.
Yeah.
And I described in detail how it felt to take these spacewalks, and apparently that's the way it feels. And this is for me, who wouldn't even get into an airplane, and yet there I was imagining being all alone in space, tied to your spaceship by a tether, you know, and describing it in ecstatic tones. Yeah. And that's why they liked it, the people who tried it. You had to argue with them to get them to come back in.
So these things occurred in your brain before they occurred in fact.
Yeah, but who knows, they occurred probably in the brains of other science fiction writers too.
Hasn't your wife ever said, why didn't you patent the idea, you fool?
Well, that was with the pocket computer. In the very first part of the book Foundation, which I wrote in 1950, I had someone pull out a pocket computer. He didn't call it that. I had to wait a few more years before someone pulled out something called a pocket computer. Yeah. And he operated it, and it worked the way the pocket computers do work. And someone said, why didn't you patent it? And I said, has it occurred to you I've only described the outside of it?
Well.
Just what goes on inside, I still don't know.
But isn't that how they inspire certain inventors to say, here's an impossible sounding thing, you tell me how to make it work?
Well, you know, I wrote stories about robots in the 1940s. Yeah. In fact, I wrote the first one in 1939. And as far as I know, every one of the early roboticists that I've met has told me he grew interested in robotics as a result of reading my stories.
Where'd the word come from if we didn't have robots?
Oh, no. Robots were invented in 1920 by Karl Čapek, a Czech playwright.
Oh, R.U.R.
R.U.R., Rossum's Universal Robots. It's just the Czech word for slave.
And that's where the word came from?
That's where the word came from.
So he gets rid of it.
And then I made the tiniest possible advance in the English language. I invented the word robotics. Didn't realize I invented it. I thought that was the word.
Yeah. Do you have any reason to believe that Mr. Morita of Sony and others have been reading your books over the years and perhaps owe you millions in idea royalties?
No, I don't know that I don't know that I could really make that stick. What the heck?
I know they read you in Japan.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, if you see these pictures, Star Wars and its sequels, there's a certain amount of stuff that came from my Foundation books. But what the heck, a certain amount of my Foundation books came from Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Yeah. So how far back do you want to go? I don't think. That's the way things work.
His descendants haven't sued you in any way?
No, not yet. I'm not even sure he has descendants.
Yeah, they've all declined and fallen. Pseudoscience is said to be a thing you hate, but what is it?
Well, things that claim to be scientific that aren't. It's possible to define science either broadly or narrowly. Broadly, it's any systematized knowledge. And narrowly, it's anything which can be measured and reproducibly measured. And you know, there are a lot of there's a lot of things which sound scientific, which develops a kind of scientific vocabulary which does not involve actual measurements, does not involve true reproducible observations, just anecdotes.
But they may involve financial rip-off, either in writing about them or pretending them.
Well, one of the ways
I'm sorry, we must take a break now. When we come back, I want you to tell me why crystals have such a beneficial effect on people and cure things. We'll be right back. Well, we were talking about what you call pseudoscience, things that either pass as science or... during the break, you gave me another definition of pseudoscience. Do you remember?
Oh, yes. You can tell pseudoscience from science by writing a book about something and seeing if it makes a lot of money. If it makes a lot of money, it's pseudoscience.
Do you lament the idea that science is still not the most attractive subject to students in this country, and that's why, in some people's eyes, we're slipping?
Well, I can't really expect that science will ever be a very popular form of study, but it can be more popular than it is.
But you can make it interesting. Is it the fact that they can't in schools that's part of it? Or is it that people think of the science club as the weird guys who walk around?
Well, I think that's a little bit of it. Some people are ashamed of being interested in science. They fear it's going to make nerds out of them.
They won't get chosen for the baseball team.
Right, and of course, girls always somehow, young ladies always feel it's somehow unfeminine to be interested, and that they'll never get a date if they study science. And in short, society seems to place a premium on scientific illiteracy, which is a shame. If we could only manage to make society neutral on the subject, we'd get enough scientists out of the population. We don't need a majority of the population. We need merely a minority, and a rather small one, but not a vanishingly small one. And we're operating now under strong discouragements for science.
Where do you see it discouraged?
Well, it's discouraged because so many people find that scientists seem to them to be mad or peculiar. It's portrayed in movies and television. The scientist is forever shrinking his children by accident, or changing himself into a fly by accident, or he has these peculiar experiments he wants to do. It's weird.
Or meeting Dr. Edward Teller.
Well, that's true too. But the popular stereotype of the scientist is not one which would make a person want to be one. You go around asking youngsters what they think of scientists, what's the picture they have when they think of scientists, and it's almost always unflattering. It's
Frankenstein in a way, isn't it?
Well, that's obviously the most popular presentation of a scientist the world has ever seen. More people know about Frankenstein than know about Einstein. And it's the same, for instance, with psychiatrists. You never see a psychiatrist on the television unless he's either A, a figure of fun, or B, sinister. It never occurs to you there might be an honest psychiatrist.
In comic fiction or whatever.
So
or drama. The phrase "mad scientist" is almost one word over the years.
That's true, and of course, in early science fiction, that was made use of. It was in comparatively later times that we recognized that scientists were people with legitimate concerns about humanity.
It'd be interesting to know with someone who seems to have an unlimited kind of brain and intelligence, what your limits are. What are things you wish you could do that you can't?
Well,
can you do math problems in your head, crossword puzzles? Can you dope out mysteries? Can you follow recipes? Are there things you just can't do?
The simple things I can do.
Change a tire?
Oh, no, now you're talking about working with my hands.
Oh, sorry.
Please. No, the things I don't know are, for instance, higher mathematics. I sort of stop at integral calculus. And economics, which is a complete mystery to me. Psychology, which I have only a layman's knowledge of. And I really know nothing about art and music except, quote, what I like.
What you like.
And so these things I don't write about, mostly.
Yeah. In money, do you know what you like?
Oh, well, I'm fortunate. I haven't the faintest idea what one does with money, but people throw it at me.
Well, another form of the question might have been, with all your nimble mentality and cerebration and all that jazz, could you have been Michael Milken if you wanted to be?
No, never, never. But I tell you, when the stock market crashed in '87, I didn't lose anything because I didn't have anything in stocks.
As simple as that.
Yeah.
Asimov's formula for financial success.
Well, I lived through 1929, you know. It's.
Gee, we're almost at commercial time again, and I forgot to follow up on why crystals seem to cure people of things. And
power of suggestion. Listen, you can cross fingers and cure people if they believe that'll do that. Mm-hmm. You can also kill people that way if they honestly believe that if you go like this to them, that means they're going to die. They might very well die.
Voodoo based on that.
Yes.
Yeah. Another way you can do it is by putting people on a macrobiotic diet who ought to see their doctors. I know of a scary case of that recently. But anyway, more of that in pseudoscience and real science, and maybe there'll be time for doomsday when we get back.
Oh, boy.
Oh, I just received a signal that we are on the air. And here I was in a Rodin thinker pose. It's appropriate, though, because this is Isaac Asimov, should you have just joined us. Nemesis is a novel.
Yes. It's
when you decide to write fiction, does that liberate you in some way to use your most unspeakable ideas that would...
Well, it's hard work, really, because a good science fiction plot has to build up a new society, one hopefully that you haven't used before. And in this case, I've managed to work out a society living on a planet that circles another planet, and together circles a red dwarf star. And you try to describe what a world is like when it's lit by a relatively cool nearby sun, and how people manage, and what the results are, you know, and you stay awake nights wondering about how to avoid falling into this incongruity or incompatibility or self-contradiction, you know. I mean, the plot itself is easy, but the social background is very difficult. And you have to do them both in good science fiction. And it's not easy. I work hard.
And you're up against the key to writing a good mystery. You got to keep people turning the page and saying what's going to happen next.
That's true.
Well as everything else.
That's true. You have to have the plot moving along so that people want to know what happens. But you don't want it obscuring the social background, because that's interesting too. Yeah. And you want to describe the social background sufficiently without obscuring the plot. And of course, one way out is to write a very dull book like Edward Bellamy's Looking Back, 2000 AD, where you just describe the social background.
Yeah. And
another way is to just write an adventure story, but you can't tell from any story you write now, except it's happening on Saturn. That's all. But in both cases, it's not what I consider good.
I don't see a notebook in your pocket anywhere. What if a great idea popped into your head suddenly?
Oh, then it stays there.
It does?
Oh, yeah. It drives my poor wife crazy. I'll wake up in the middle of the night and say, hey, I've got a good idea. She says, write it down, write it down. Why? I said, and I go to sleep. In the morning, it's still there.
That's another rule that you're an exception to, then.
In fact, I used to make up limericks in the middle of the night and remember them in the morning.
Do you remember the one about satyriasis?
Oh, yes.
Do you?
Sure.
Can you do it in under 30 seconds?
Yes. There was something about satyriasis that arouses psychiatrists' biases. But we're both of us pleased we're in this way diseased, as the damsel who's waiting to try us is.
Holy mackerel. Can you say things like that on television? We'll find out.
Not a single naughty word.
Not one. If we're back after this, you'll know that it got through. I don't know why I'm doing this with Isaac Asimov, but a friend of mine ran across a puzzle in a profile of a scientist or a brilliant mind of some sort. And it was a simple-sounding puzzle. It stumped the faculty of MIT and the student body, which is maybe even more remarkable. And eventually, whoever this article was about, and I've forgotten, said, yes, it's difficult, but solved it in 20 minutes, and then amazingly evolved a theory for all such puzzles. Shall I tell you what it is, and see if it may be the kind of thing you just hate?
No, it's just the sort of thing I'll never be able to solve.
It's easily describable. You have 12 balls. Picture 12 white billiard balls. 11 of them are identical, and the 12th one, although they appear identical, is either lighter or heavier.
Oh, and then how can you tell which one is the one with 3 weighings?
You have 3 weighings on a balance to describe the odd ball. Remember, it's either lighter or heavier. That's the key.
Right.
You don't know which, or
Right.
which ball it is. I ruined the vacation once of a man who invented the bomb sight or something by telling him this. So don't tell me the answer. And his wife finally said, please, it isn't an answer you can give in a sentence. There are many, many ways. But now, my question is not, can you solve that, nor am I going to call you in 2 days and ask if you've got it. But is that a kind of intelligence that is unlike the one that, say, you have, or Sagan has, or whoever the other man was you said was smarter than you are?
Marvin Minsky.
Yes.
Well, it's probably, I'm not very good at solving things like that. In fact, I'll tell you how not good I am. I've had that thing explained to me 5 times. Do you think I can manage to remember it? No, I can't.
I know.
I'll have to have it explained the 6th
It's
time.
about a 3-page, because each case there are 3 possibilities and so on and so on.
Yes,
You always
that's
end up
right.
you always need one more weighing, except when you...
Unfortunately, what I'm good at is seeing things instantly. If I don't see them instantly, it's no use thinking about it
that's
for
no good.
2 years.
Can you even conceive of writer's block?
No, I can't.
'Cause
Not
it's a
really.
very real thing to some writers. What do you think it is?
Well, I could easily have writer's block if I were working on only one thing. You get tired of working on something. Something sticks you, and you begin thinking in circles. And the harder you try to get out of it, the harder you fail. But I've always got 6 different things I'm supposed to do. Whenever I get tired of one thing, I switch to another. By the time I finish to something else and I go back to the first, what was a problem is no longer a problem.
Yeah.
So that there never has been a day in which I couldn't sit down and write, though I don't always write the same thing that I might have written if I hadn't gotten tired of it.
I see. In under a minute, I'm a good fairy, and I have a magic wand, and you may ask me one question that's bugged you over the many, many years that you'd love to have the answer to before passing on, assuming there is an on.
Well, all right. The question I would ask is, how does memory work? I've got an excellent memory. You ask me, it comes up instantly. And I don't know how it works.
And when it fails, it's interesting.
Oh, yeah, then I get scared.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, sometimes you know a word and you can't think of it. I always go and ask my wife. And
By
she
the way,
can't think of it.
I'd answer that for you, but A, we're out of time, and B, it was on the tip of my tongue. Isaac Asimov, obvious joke. Thank you for being here. See you next time.